So I'm here with Clair Sullivan. Claire gave an awesome talk yesterday. I really enjoyed it, where Claire talked about some of the really cool machine learning techniques they're using at GitHub. And can you tell me a little bit about what you're actually using the machine learning for those who haven't watched your talk yet?
Sure. So we released a new feature last year called repository recommendations. And the idea is, using just like a classic recommender engine, can we find a way to put code in front of users who might be looking for code? For instance, if we have developers who want to be helping out in the open source community, developing code, they may not know where to go to find projects to work on. So we want to be able to recommend to them good projects that might benefit from their help. So repository recommendations is just, it's a tab you'll see right on the main Google page, GitHub page when you log in. And it'll just give you this infinite scrolling list of repositories that might be of interest to you. And it's based on a lot of things. There's so many elements that go into it, but in general, it's the repositories that you already watch or that you've starred, the people you follow and what they've been interested in, your page views from a historical context and things like that.
I really liked that you broke everything down in your talk about the kind of metrics that you actually looked at, because I know that most people really excited about that, but a lot of people don't necessarily share those details. So I was really excited that you talked about some of the unexpected metrics you had, such as just the presence of a README, whether it has any information on it or not. Is there anything that you were particularly surprised by while you were doing this?
I think the thing that surprised me most was when we started trying to quantify the responsiveness of a repo. And, our open source experts had gone through and they kind of had identified examples of repositories that were considered responsive. And when I actually started running all of our repositories through the responsiveness algorithm, the ones that had the highest scores weren't the ones that our experts had identified as being the most responsive. And that turned out to be a bias that we'd introduced into the system based on the size of the repo. So if you have a very large repo, a lot of active development going on in it, it's a lot harder to get a PR merged, because you may not understand the historical context and how that community has evolved in time, versus there's some really high quality smaller repos, and the probability of creating an issue that gets looked at and addressed, or a PR that gets merged, is much higher with those. So they actually scored higher on responsiveness than some of the larger ones.
That's super interesting. I know that when I pull requests to a really large repository, I feel shy about it, and I'm always like, it's okay if it takes 3 months. I'm very chill with it, because I know how busy people get as well, or just that they have to be constantly live prioritizing stuff as it comes in. And I'm sure that that would have been so interesting to sort of find that sweet spot in the whole responsiveness thing.
You may have some really awesome new feature that you want to put into TensorFlow, for instance, but TensorFlow is huge and there's tons of developers on it. And so, the little features may not get some attention, if they're triaging this really big, awesome new thing, or they found a bug. So being able to also surface those, that sweet spot, like you said, the smaller repos that really, are very active and high quality repos and might actually be much more attuned to your personal interests. TensorFlow is of broad interest, but, some of these smaller repositories that are more of a niche market, we can surface those to you as well.
Well, it was very helpful for me as a maintainer of very small libraries, but I do very small, to maybe up my responsiveness. I think if anything, I know that that's not the only metric, but it definitely made me go, ooh. Even if I just reply thanking them and saying, hey, I'm going to get to this on Thursday or something, that would probably be helpful in order to get my stuff surfaced. So I'm not trying to game the algorithm, but it was very helpful for me to know otherwise.
Yeah, and of course none of us try to game the algorithm, but you have a new developer, and new developers want to know that they're, they put something out there. They're putting themselves out there, really. You put your first pull request, that's a stressful thing.
It's really scary.
Yeah, you're getting people reviewing your code, and that's a personal thing, right? So you've got these repositories that you can bring the new developers to, and they can have some sort of assurance that if they create an issue, that somebody's going to look at that and somebody's going to take them seriously and get back to them in a comment.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's sort of it's beneficial on both ends. You can improve your algorithm, but you're also encouraging people to just be better open source citizens. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's what it's all about, bringing code to users and users to code.
Awesome. So now that you've sort of had this first sort of big run, if you're able to share any details or even just like high level thinking, what's next for GitHub and machine learning?
Yeah, well, so it turns out that machine learning is actually a fairly new function at GitHub. So right now we're really staffing up everything that we need to make it a truly, robust function within inside GitHub. But the thing that I'm most excited about there is it's actually a question I got asked in my interview. And GitHub gets involved with a lot of social good causes, for instance, working with children from less affluent homes and neighborhoods. And how can we teach that kid to code, and maybe that kid's never going to be able to afford to go to college, but we've got all of this data on how developers develop and how they evolve. So you've got this kid who's learning to code. Can we put the right repositories in front of them at the right time to help them, 20 years from now, do my job? Maybe they're not going to be able to afford to go to college, but we can still help them along their growth path. We know how developers evolve and how they grow. And we've got, half a petabyte of data today on that, and that's just growing. So can we use that to benefit society? And that's like one of the problems I'm most excited about.
That makes me excited. Speaking of excitement, on a personal level, outside of GitHub, what excites you about machine learning?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. So I come from like an IoT and sensor network background, and like geo position sensors in real time, and that's like all of my past. And I see so much development happening in the geo world and satellite imagery. And I'm just so excited for like pattern of life detection and quantification. We've seen cases where, people have started small. Like I knew of a case that was in New York City where they took a really high quality camera and they just pointed it out at the skyline of New York. And what could somebody learn from that? Just day to day watching, these images come back. But now we've got, it's not just New York, it's like the whole planet. I've got some friends who they've got this really great satellite imagery startup. And what can you learn about the behaviors of people and their needs and their wants just by looking at imagery, just by looking at sensors? That there's sensors everywhere on all kinds of things. And how can we use the data from that sensor? And you're starting to see some really high quality software development, open source software development around these things. And it just takes like that smart person with the right understanding of ML to really create some very disruptive, like in a cool way, technology.
That's really cool. And I'm from New York, so you're straight after my heart.
Oh, there you go.
So thank you for being so inspiring during our interview today. And thank you for making time to join me in the green room.
Well, thank you for having me.